My husband beat me every day. One night, I passed out. He told the doctor I fell down the stairs. But when the doctor came back, he already knew the truth.
My name is Mira, and I used to believe that love meant endurance. That if you stayed long enough, quiet enough, patient enough, someone who hurt you would eventually see your worth. But love, I've learned, can also be a kind of prison. And the walls are not always made of bricks, they can be made of words. When I first met Adrian, he was the kind of man everyone admired. Tall, confident, with that effortless charm that could fill a room. He laughed easily, tipped generously, and had a way of making you feel like you were the only person that mattered. I was 24, working as a teacher in a small private school, living with my widowed mother in a modest house filled with faded curtains and the smell of cardamom tea. My world was small but peaceful. Adrian changed that. He worked at a local bank, and one morning he came to our school to deliver a sponsorship check. I remember how his eyes caught mine while I was carrying a stack of papers. He smiled, and something inside me fluttered, something naive and hopeful. He sent flowers the next day. He visited my mother, bringing fruits and respect. He said the kind of words girls like me were raised to believe were rare: you deserve to be cherished. I'll never let you struggle again. When we got married 6 months later, my mother cried tears of joy. I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. The first year was beautiful, almost cinematic. We moved into a neat apartment with cream walls and balcony plants. Adrian would kiss my forehead every morning before leaving for work. He'd text me during lunch, "Miss you already, sunshine." At night, we'd sit on the couch and watch old movies, his arm around me, the scent of his cologne filling the air. It felt like safety. But slowly, so slowly I almost missed it, things began to shift. It started with small things. "You don't need to wear that dress outside. Why do you talk so much with your colleague? You look better without makeup." I told myself it was love. Care. Protection. That's what I was taught growing up. When a man loves you, he guards you. The first time his voice raised, I laughed nervously and blamed myself. The first time he slammed a door, I told myself he was just stressed from work. The first time he hit the wall beside my head, I told myself I must have said something wrong. He never said sorry. Instead, he'd bring roses, kiss my hands, and whisper, "You make me lose control sometimes. Don't make me angry, Mira." And I believed him. Because when he smiled again, it was like the sun returned. Months turned into years. I stopped meeting my friends. Stopped visiting my mother. Stopped wearing the clothes I liked. Adrian preferred me simple. Quiet. Predictable. And in trying to please him, I began to vanish. He controlled everything, what I wore, where I went, even the groceries I bought. He'd check my phone, my receipts, the call logs. If a man's name appeared on my contact list, he'd interrogate me for hours.
At night, he'd sit on the couch with a drink, staring at the TV in silence, while I cooked in the kitchen. Sometimes, out of nowhere, he'd call my name sharply, and I'd flinch. I lived on edge, measuring every word, every breath. I told myself it wasn't fear. It was love that demanded obedience. Because if I just stayed patient, maybe he'd go back to the man I married. It happened on a rainy night. He came home later than usual, smelling of alcohol. His tie hung loose around his neck, his eyes cold. I had made his favorite meal, chicken stew with rice, and I waited with a smile. "Where were you?" he asked. "Just home," I said softly. "Don't lie to me." He pushed the plate off the table, the stew spilling across the tiles like blood. I froze. Then came the slap. A sharp, stinging sound that echoed through the room. For a moment, everything went silent, except for the sound of my own heartbeat. He looked at me, breathing heavily, as if he too couldn't believe what he'd done. Then, just as suddenly, he pulled me into his arms. "You make me crazy, Mira. You know I love you. Why do you test me?" That night, I cleaned the floor quietly while he slept. My cheek burned, my hands trembled, but I told myself it was just one bad night. It wasn't. For weeks, he acted like nothing happened. He'd bring me gifts, perfumes, jewelry, new dresses I never dared to wear outside. He told everyone how lucky he was to have me. People envied us. When we visited my mother, he held my hand tightly in public, but his grip hurt. She looked at me once and said, "You look tired, Mira." I smiled and lied, just busy with housework. Because what could I say? That the man she prayed for to love me was turning into my nightmare? On my 29th birthday, he threw a party. He invited his colleagues, neighbors, and even my childhood friend, Rena. I remember feeling strange that night, dressed in a red gown he chose for me, smiling as people sang happy birthday. When everyone left, I found him sitting alone in the dark living room. "Why did you laugh so much with Rena?" he asked quietly. I froze. "She's just an old friend." I saw how she looked at me. Before I could respond, the glass he was holding shattered against the wall. Then he stood up, and I saw something in his eyes that terrified me. That night, the bruises were not easy to hide. Days blurred into each other. I learned to predict his moods by the way he closed the door. If it slammed, I knew I had to be silent. If it clicked softly, I knew I was safe for the night. I became an expert at silence. At smiling when people asked if everything was okay. At using makeup to hide purple marks. I stopped recognizing the woman in the mirror. My laughter, once so loud and free, was now something fragile and foreign. It was a Tuesday evening. The air was thick with the smell of rain again. He came home furious, something about work, about a deal gone wrong. I stayed quiet, hoping silence would calm him. But silence only made him angrier. He shouted about dinner, about the bills, about me never being enough. Then he pushed me. My head hit the corner of the table, and everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I was lying in the hospital, my head bandaged, my body aching. Adrian was sitting beside me, tears in his eyes, holding my hand. He told the nurse. She slipped down the stairs. My poor wife. I wanted to scream the truth, but my voice wouldn't come out. The nurse looked at me, really looked, and I knew she didn't believe him. But she said nothing. That was the night something broke inside me. Not my bones, they would heal. Something deeper. The illusion. The lie I'd told myself for years, that love was supposed to hurt. That was the night I realized I wasn't living. I was surviving. And survival wasn't enough anymore. The doctor's words still echoed in her ears long after he left the room. "You need to be careful, that man isn't what he seems." The lights in the hospital ward flickered softly, casting pale shadows on the white walls. The faint beeping of the monitor next to her bed was the only sound breaking the silence. Maya turned her face toward the window, the night outside swallowing the city in a blanket of darkness. The bruises on her arms throbbed under the tight bandages. She could still smell the faint cologne on her husband's jacket that hung over the chair, a scent that once meant comfort but now only brought fear. When she closed her eyes, she could still see him, Jordan, standing by the door, pretending to look worried while the doctor examined her. His hands had trembled, not with guilt, but with the fear of exposure. He had told the hospital staff that Maya fell from the stairs while cleaning the house. He played his roles so perfectly, the loving husband, the panicked caretaker. But Maya remembered everything. The rage in his eyes. The way he'd slammed her against the wall. The way he whispered through gritted teeth, "You'll never leave me." Never. A soft knock broke her thoughts. "Come in," she said, her voice barely audible. A nurse stepped in, a woman with kind eyes and a cautious smile. "Mrs. Anderson, how are you feeling?" "I've been better," Maya murmured. The nurse glanced at the file in her hands. "You're lucky, you know." The doctor said another blow to the head could have been fatal. Maya's throat tightened. "I know." The nurse hesitated, then lowered her voice. "There's something else. The doctor didn't want to say it in front of your husband. But he noticed some older injuries." Ones that didn't come from a fall. Maya's eyes filled with tears. She turned her face away. Please, don't tell him you said that. The nurse nodded silently. You're safe here, Mrs. Anderson. If you ever need to talk, press this button. Someone will come immediately. When the nurse left, Maya sat alone in the quiet room. Safe here. The words felt hollow. Because she knew, once she left this hospital, she'd be right back in his hands. The next morning, Jordan returned with flowers, a bouquet of lilies, her favorite once upon a time. He smiled, the same charming smile that had once won her heart. Hey, beautiful, he said softly. You gave me such a scare. Maya stared at him, silent. He sat beside her bed, gently taking her hand. You have to stop being so clumsy, babe. The stairs are dangerous. She flinched at his touch. He noticed, his smile faltering for a second before returning. You know I love you, right? Maya nodded mechanically. Yes, Jordan. But inside, something had shifted. The fear that used to paralyze her was changing, hardening into something colder. Something stronger. 2 days later, the doctor came in while Jordan was away making a phone call. He closed the door quietly and leaned closer. Mrs. Anderson, he whispered, I don't think you fell down the stairs. I've seen too many cases like yours. Maya didn't answer. Her lips trembled. He continued, there's a counselor here who helps victims of domestic abuse. She can arrange a private meeting, away from your husband. You just have to say the word. Maya's eyes darted to the door. She imagined Jordan walking in at any second, that cold look in his eyes. I can't, she whispered. He'll find out. The doctor hesitated, then slid a small folded card under her blanket. If you change your mind, call this number. Day or night. That night, Maya hid the card in her pillowcase. When Jordan came back, he brought takeout, her favorite noodles, and insisted on feeding her himself. You need your strength, he said. But the tenderness was just a mask, his eyes never softened. They were sharp, calculating. She watched him eat across from her, acting as though nothing had happened. Her hands trembled slightly. Jordan, she said quietly. Yeah? Do you ever regret anything? He smiled faintly. Regret? No, baby. Everything I do is for us. When he left the room that night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The doctor's card pressed against her chest like a hidden promise. She whispered to herself, not for us, Jordan. Not anymore. The next morning, Maya signed her discharge papers. Jordan held her by the waist, escorting her to the car, smiling at every nurse they passed. My wife's clumsy, but she's strong, he joked. Inside the car, silence stretched between them. The city blurred past the window. At a red light, Jordan reached over and touched her cheek. You're not thinking of doing something stupid, are you? Her heart froze. He smiled. Because I'd hate to lose you. When they reached home, she went straight to the bedroom. Her hands shook as she packed a few things into her bag, documents, cash, her old phone. But before she could zip it shut, she heard his footsteps. What are you doing? Jordan's voice was calm, too calm. I was just organizing, she stammered. He walked closer, his eyes scanning the half-packed bag. Then he smiled again, that same, terrifying smile. Good, he said. The phone operator's voice was calm but urgent. You're doing the right thing, ma'am. Are you safe right now? Maya looked over her shoulder toward the bedroom door. Jordan's breathing was steady, deep, rhythmic, the sound of a man who believed he still had complete control. Yes, she whispered. For now. Good. We can send someone to pick you up in the morning. But you need to make sure you have identification, some money, and a few personal items. Can you manage that? Her hand tightened around the phone. I already packed them. Perfect. Don't leave any trace of a call. Delete this number right after we hang up. We'll text you a safe word in the morning. When you text it back, we'll come. Maya's eyes brimmed with tears. Thank you. The voice softened. You're not alone anymore. She hung up, her trembling fingers quickly erasing the call and wiping the screen. The silence felt deafening now, the kind that comes before a storm. She hid the phone under the loose floorboard near her bed, the one Jordan never noticed. Then she slipped back under the blanket, pretending to sleep. Hours crawled by. The clock read 3:47 a.m. when she heard it, a faint creak of the floorboard in the hallway. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Jordan never got up this early. The shadow in the doorway moved, slow, deliberate. His voice followed, low and venomous. Who were you talking to? Maya froze. What are you talking about? Don't lie to me. He stepped closer, his face half hidden in the dark. I heard you whispering. Her mind raced. The call. He couldn't have. I was praying, she said quickly, her voice barely steady. Jordan studied her face for a long, unbearable moment. Then he smiled, that sick, knowing smile. Good, he said finally. You should pray. You'll need it. He turned and walked away, the sound of his footsteps fading down the hall. Maya lay there, gasping quietly, the weight of his words pressing on her chest like a stone. At dawn, the first rays of sunlight crept through the curtains. She moved silently, slipping her bag under her jacket. Jordan was in the kitchen, humming to himself as he made coffee. The casual normalcy of it made her stomach twist. Morning, babe, he said without turning. You're quiet today. Didn't sleep well, she replied softly. He smiled. You'll feel better after breakfast. The phone buzzed once in her pocket, the text from Safe Haven. Safe word, Luna. She swallowed hard, her palms sweating. She needed to wait until he left for work. Every minute felt like walking on glass. At 8:30, he grabbed his keys and leaned down to kiss her cheek. Don't go anywhere, he said. I might come home early. Her stomach clenched, but she smiled faintly. I'll be here. When the door finally shut behind him, Maya stood frozen for a moment, as if afraid even the walls might betray her. Then she exhaled shakily and pulled out her phone. She typed the word. Luna. The reply came instantly. Stay where you are. We're on our way. She quickly gathered the bag, the small jewelry box that belonged to her late mother, and a folded photo of her as a child, the girl she once was, the girl she was finally trying to save. But just as she reached for the door, the sound of tires screeched outside. Her blood ran cold. She peeked through the curtain. Jordan's car. He wasn't supposed to be back. He stormed through the front door, face flushed with fury. Who the hell were you texting? He bellowed. Maya's breath caught. He had seen the phone. He lunged toward her, grabbing her wrist. The phone clattered to the floor. You think you can run from me? He hissed. You belong to me. She struggled, trying to wrench free. Let go of me, Jordan. He shoved her against the wall. Pain exploded in her shoulder. Outside, the sound of another car door slammed. Voices, hurried footsteps. Jordan turned, startled. The front door burst open. 2 women and a man entered, one wearing a navy vest with Safe Haven Shelter printed on it. Sir, step away from her. Jordan's face twisted with rage. This is my wife. You can't just. But before he could finish, the man pulled out his phone. The police are on their way. Don't make this harder. Jordan's eyes flicked to Maya, wild and furious. You'll regret this, he spat. You'll regret ever crossing me. The rescuers closed in, one gently wrapping an arm around Maya's shoulder, guiding her out the door. She could still hear Jordan's voice screaming behind her as they led her into the van. The van door shut, sealing off his voice like a ghost fading in the distance. Maya sat there, shaking, tears streaming down her face, not from fear, but from the overwhelming weight of freedom. The woman beside her squeezed her hand. "You're safe now, Maya. He can't touch you again." Maya looked out the window as the house disappeared from view. For the first time in years, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel weak. The first night at the shelter was the hardest. The bed was soft, the room clean, but my heart felt heavy. For years, I had slept beside danger, and now, in safety, the silence felt unfamiliar. The walls were painted pale yellow, the scent of lavender drifting from somewhere down the hall. But all I could hear were echoes, the sound of glass breaking, of harsh words whispered like knives. I kept expecting the door to burst open, for his shadow to fall across me again. But instead, I woke to the sound of gentle voices. A woman with kind eyes knocked softly. "Maya, breakfast is ready. We have group counseling at 10 if you'd like to join." Her name was Clara. She'd been through her own battles. I could see it in her calm smile, the one that carried both pain and peace. I nodded silently. "I'll come." At the table, other women sat, some with bruises, others with hollow eyes like mine. No one needed to explain anything. We just understood. One of them, a young mother named Lila, smiled at me as her little boy tugged at her sleeve. "First time?" she asked. I nodded again. "Then you're stronger than you think," she said softly. "The first step's always the hardest." For the first time in years, I smiled. Days turned into weeks. I started helping in the kitchen, folding clothes for new arrivals, reading stories to the children who came in frightened and silent. I found peace in routine, in little things like brewing tea, or planting herbs in the small garden outside. But healing isn't a straight road. Every night, I still saw his face. Every sound outside still made me flinch. One evening, while washing dishes, I heard Clara call my name. "Maya, you've got mail." I frowned. "Mail? For me?" She nodded, handing me an envelope. It was plain, no return address. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single folded paper. I unfolded it slowly. And froze. It was a photo. Of my old house. With a note scrawled in the corner. "You can run, but you can't hide." The room spun. My chest tightened. He had found me. Clara saw the color drain from my face. "Maya? What is it?" I handed her the photo, my hands shaking. She glanced at it, her expression hardening instantly. "We'll handle this," she said firmly. "You're safe here." Within hours, the shelter contacted the police. They filed a restraining order, placed security cameras near the entrance, and moved me to a new location. But fear, it doesn't disappear that easily. For days, I barely slept. Every creak, every whisper of wind, I thought it was him. Then one morning, Clara came into my room with the newspaper in hand. "Maya, you need to see this." I took it, my eyes scanning the front page, and my breath caught. Local businessman arrested for insurance fraud and assault investigation. Jordan's name was right there. His photograph, the same smug smile, under the headline. The article said the police had uncovered a trail of financial crimes, false claims, and hidden accounts. But what caught my eye was the last line. "Tip received from anonymous source led to his arrest." Clara smiled faintly. "Looks like someone else decided it was time for justice." I didn't know who the source was, maybe one of his old partners, maybe karma wearing a human face. But I knew what it meant. I wasn't just free. I was vindicated. That night, for the first time in a long time, I stood by the window and looked at the moon. It was full and calm, the same moon I had prayed under the night I sent the message, Luna. Now, that word meant something else. It meant I had survived. I whispered softly. Maybe some stories don't need revenge. They just need truth to come out. And as I closed my eyes, I felt a strange peace, not because he was punished, but because I had finally stopped being afraid. I never imagined peace would sound like this. The quiet hum of a morning breeze through open curtains, the soft ticking of a clock on a wall I painted myself. Months had passed since the newspaper headline. Jordan was behind bars, and I was finally breathing again. But sometimes, freedom feels too big, like you don't quite know what to do with it. I had lived for years inside walls made of fear. Now, there were no walls, just open sky. The shelter became my home for a while longer. I started helping out more, counseling new arrivals, folding their trembling hands in mine, and whispering the same words Lila once told me. You're stronger than you think. Every woman there had a story that could break you. But what amazed me most was how they still managed to smile, to braid their daughter's hair, to cook lentils with laughter, to hold on to little pieces of joy like flowers growing through cracks in the pavement. One afternoon, Clara found me sitting by the window, sketching something on paper. She smiled. That's beautiful. What are you drawing? I looked down. It was a small, hand-drawn house surrounded by trees, a garden in bloom. It's a dream, I said softly. A home for women like us, but not just a shelter. A real home. A place to heal. Clara's eyes glimmered. Maybe you should make it real. I laughed quietly. With what money? You'd be surprised what you can build when you start believing again. Her words echoed in me for days. And then, something changed. A week later, I received a letter, official, stamped, neatly folded. It was from a lawyer. My hands shook as I opened it, thinking the worst. But instead, I found a single page that read, Mrs. Maya Carter. Following the investigation of Mr. Jordan Carter's illegal financial activities, the court has released a portion of his seized assets to you as rightful compensation for unpaid marital debts and damages. Amount, $86,000. $86,000. I dropped the paper, covering my mouth, trembling. Not because of the money, but because of what it represented. For years, he had taken everything, my peace, my freedom, my worth. Now, life had quietly given something back. Clara hugged me when I showed her the letter. You see, she said, smiling. The universe has a way of balancing things. But I didn't want to waste it on revenge or comfort. I wanted to build something that would outlive the pain. A few months later, I stood outside a small, sunlit house on the outskirts of town. The paint was chipped, the garden overgrown, but I saw potential. With some of the money, I bought it. Not for me, but for others. I called it the Haven of Light. It started small, just 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a courtyard filled with wildflowers that refused to stop blooming. The women who arrived there were scared, lost, broken. Just like I once was. We cooked together, painted the walls in soft blues and yellows, and planted vegetables in the backyard. Every wall carried laughter again. Every corner whispered healing. Sometimes, when the wind blew through the open windows, I swore I could hear echoes, not of Jordan's voice anymore, but of all the women who had found courage here. It wasn't just a shelter. It was rebirth. One evening, I received a call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Hello? Mrs. Carter? The voice was deep, formal. This is Officer Daniels from County Corrections. We thought you should know. Jordan Carter was released today. The words hit me like cold rain. Released. I froze for a moment, my fingers tightening around the phone. Thank you, I said softly, and hung up. For a few minutes, I just stood there, listening to the sound of my own breathing. Old fear tried to crawl back, that creeping shadow that once ruled my nights. But this time, something inside me stood taller. I walked out into the courtyard, where the evening light painted the sky pink and gold. Lila was there, hanging laundry, her little boy playing nearby. She looked at me. Everything okay? I smiled faintly. Yes. Everything's fine. And I meant it. Because for the first time, I knew he couldn't touch me anymore. Not my peace, not my spirit, not the life I had built from the ashes. 2 weeks later, the news came. Jordan had been found dead in a cheap motel room on the edge of town, a suspected overdose. No note, no visitors, no tears shed. When I read the article, I didn't cry. I didn't even feel relief. Just stillness. He had lived a life built on control, greed, and lies, and in the end, that's all he was left with. Some people said it was tragic. Maybe it was. But I saw it differently. It was poetic justice, the kind that doesn't come with noise or blood, but silence. The kind that lets life take its natural course, giving each soul exactly what it earned. Months rolled into a year. The Haven grew, with donations, volunteers, and community support. We hosted art classes, therapy groups, and storytelling nights where women could reclaim their voices. One night, a young woman named Emily arrived. She had bruises on her arms, tears streaking her cheeks, and a small baby wrapped in a blanket. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she whispered. I took her hand and smiled gently. "You do now." When I tucked her into bed that night, I saw a reflection of my old self, lost, scared, but still carrying that tiny flicker of hope. And for the first time, I realized, maybe my pain had a purpose. I wasn't meant to be broken. I was meant to be rebuilt, so I could help others do the same. Years later, the Haven became something much bigger than I had imagined. We expanded into 3 houses, each named after a virtue: hope, strength, and grace. Every woman who left our doors left with her head higher, her shoulders straighter. They found jobs, homes, laughter. Sometimes, they came back with flowers, saying, "You saved me." But I always told them the truth. "No, sweetheart. You saved yourself. I just showed you where the door was." One evening, I sat in the courtyard again, the same spot where I once trembled after hearing Jordan's name. The sky was fading into dusk, fireflies blinking in the grass. I could hear laughter inside, Lila telling stories, children playing, the clatter of plates and voices that sounded like home. I picked up my journal and wrote the last page of my story. They said the past defines you. But I learned it doesn't have to. The past only plants seeds, it's up to you what grows. For years, I watered fear. Now, I water peace. I closed the book, smiling softly. The night breeze whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of jasmine and something sweeter, freedom. I looked up at the stars, and for a fleeting second, I imagined my younger self standing there too, the frightened woman who once hid behind locked doors. I wanted to tell her everything. That she'd survive. That she'd rebuild. That one day, she'd create a home where broken women would learn to laugh again.
But I didn't need to say it. Because she already knew. She was me. And I was finally free. The end. Sparkle's poetic justice doesn't always come as revenge. Sometimes, it comes as peace. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to The Moral Tales. Every click helps these stories reach someone who might need a little hope today. Herb.